Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Education. The board started this evening in closed session beginning at approximately 6:10 for the purpose of discussion on employment of employee matters and for approval of closed session minutes for February 13th, 28th, March 6th, and the March 8th meetings. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Hirsch?
Here.
Mrs. Davy is absent. Mrs. Ostichek?
Here.
Mr. Collins?
Here.
Mrs. Droney?
Here.
Ms. Conroy? Here. Mr. Calquist?
Here.
Thank you. We have 6 board members present. 1 is absent. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you to all who have joined us tonight. We've had several meetings in a row with a full crowd, and we're happy to see people engaged in school business. I would assume that many of you have come here tonight relating to the staff reductions that we'll be voting on this evening. We welcome your comments. We've received many comments also from individuals through emails and members of the community and students who have contacted board members in other ways. I just want to make a couple introductory comments before I open closed session. And, just to make sure everybody's aware that staffing reductions are occurring in districts across the state of Illinois. Education funding ranks 50th out of the 50 states in our country. There was a recent survey released by the Illinois State Board of Education, and it reported that 66% of school districts in our state have undergone teacher layoffs going into this next fiscal year. That's up from 49% last year. It's the responsibility of the Board of Education to ensure that we have practices and plans in place to maintain fiscal health for our school district. In order to comply with our fiscal policies and with the state fiscal requirements, this Board of Education established a budget reduction plan with a net reduction goal of $3 million, which would allow us to maintain sufficient cash to avoid the need for borrowing. The outcome, the district utilized an educational program review tool, and that was the EPIRD process, which helped us prioritize the resource needs for the district. And this was a process that was conducted over several months and engaged the time of many of our staff, as well as community members, in a process that evaluated 28 educational and operational programs to help measure their value and their cost. The effectiveness of each program was analyzed in order to make decisions regarding program improvements, modifications, reductions, and additions. The outcome was our approval at the March 8th board meeting for net reductions of $3 million. However, there were some areas within that where additional funding resources were added, which included reading support, our gifted program, and special education. Any decision to reduce a staff member is difficult, but the process taken to implement these reductions was very thoughtful. In the case of honorable dismissal decisions driven by headcount reductions, first, second, and third year teachers are the most affected. The staffing and enrollment plan for the next school year is influenced by enrollment changes, class size, scheduling, teacher certification, instructional strategy implementation, such as the freshman cohort program at the high school, and the recommendations from our EPIRD process. The process of honorably dismissing staff who are non-tenured is dictated by Illinois school code, legislation, and the collective bargaining agreement. Student and community input are always appreciated, but currently they're not part of the honorable dismissal process. Once we have the schedules completed at the various grade levels, those qualified certified staff members who have been honorably discharged will have the opportunity to reapply for posted vacancies for which they hold the appropriate certification. And it's always the goal of our district to hire the best and most qualified teachers. We have only about 8 individuals signed up tonight, so I was concerned we would have more than our allotted time, but we should be fine with 3 minutes for public comment. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up for public comment. I will call your name, and if you could come up to the microphone and turn it on and start with your name and address, and please limit your time to 3 minutes. There's a light up there that will help you keep track of your time when the yellow light comes on. We would ask that you try to wrap up your comments. When the red light goes off, I'm going to cut you off, so don't feel that I'm being rude. This is just to make sure that we have enough time to conduct the business of the board. So again, we thank all of you who are here. We thank you for your interest and engagement in our district, for all the people that have contacted us via email, and we are here open and ready to hear your comments. We will start with Mike, and I'm not sure if I can read the last name, Rukti.
All right. Hello. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Rukti, and I'm a senior at York High School. I'm here tonight to address what feels like an overwhelming sense of hypocrisy in District 205. While we students at York spend hours learning dates and equations, the things we remember most at the end of the day are the lessons in character that our teachers instill in us. Among these lessons is responsibility. Not only do we students have to display our responsibility to learn, but our teachers have to show their responsibility through their dedication allowing us to learn. The question I must pose to the board is this: if students and teachers are responsible for their decisions, why are you, the board, not making responsible decisions for either of those parties? One instance of this irresponsible behavior I would like to bring up involves the EPERT committee. I learned just the other day that it was recommended that 2.2 English teachers be cut at York. However, a total of 6 teachers were cut, almost as 3 times much as originally recommended. Why must time and resources have been wasted in the creation of the EPERT committee if the board was only going to ignore their recommendations? Such irresponsible actions make me question the motives of the district. I, for one, have seen firsthand many other irresponsible budgetary decisions by the district over my years here. For example, the installation of the projector system at York only 2 years ago seems to be the perfect example of wasteful spending, especially considering that there was a perfectly fine television system installed in the first place. I know that I am not the only one here to have seen such fiscal irresponsibility over the past few years, which leads me to my final statement. How can District 205 expect us students to learn to make responsible decisions when they do not make them themselves? Students need teachers to learn, and the riffing of teachers seems to be taking away our ability to do so. In your effort to better our education, you end up contradicting yourselves on the very principles that education was founded on. All I ask is that you reconsider the proposed riffs in order to better align yourselves with the very values this board is supposed to uphold. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Quinn Wormling.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Quinn Wormling. I'm a senior at York. I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity to talk about the reductions in the English department staff. As a student who has been extremely impacted by my English classes, I feel as though I have a responsibility to come up here and express my concerns. There is a beautiful thing about the English classes that truly makes them unique from any other classes I've taken at York. They are intimate. The reason the English classes at York have been so successful, have influenced me so positively, is because of the individualized attention and feedback inherent in the everyday happenings of the classes. In my English classes, I've learned to have intelligent discussions with my peers. I've been given some of the most constructive and detailed feedback on essays I can possibly imagine. My English teachers have absolutely given me 110%, and for that, and for the effect this specialized attention has had on my writing, literacy skills, speaking skills, and overall life outlook, I'm forever grateful. The secret to a successful English class is small class sizes. Only then can students get the specialized attention they need to adequately develop. Only in a small class can class discussion even work. I know many of my teachers stay at school until the wee hours of night grading papers, and the results are incredible. Their feedback is always beyond helpful. I can't imagine an English teacher in a class with more students could even possibly gain a close enough relationship with every single student to give them the best feedback possible. I've seen freshmen enter York virtually illiterate and walk out spouting James Joyce quotes. I'm one of those kids. My fear is that with these reductions in staff, class sizes will naturally have to be larger, and the quality of English students' education will be diminished from the excellence that I received. Most classes can function perfectly with large class sizes. English classes, though, cannot. Because of these cuts, the remaining English teachers will have to compensate. Class sizes will be larger. Class discussions, especially at the freshman and sophomore levels, will as a result be impossible. I, in my 4 years at York, have had only 3 debates in classes other than English. Speech class is no longer a requirement. If English class discussions are no longer effective because of large class sizes, students will be deprived of this essential life skill, the ability to discuss intelligently. This truly saddens me. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Paige Piotr.
Hi, I'm Paige Piotr. I'm a senior at York. I don't have anything prepared, so bear with me. I transferred to and from English classes throughout my 4 years at York, so I've had pretty much the majority of the English department. I guess I'm kind of confused as to why the English department was, it seemed singled out when there were 6 teachers taken out of the department. The English teachers have pretty much gotten me through my high school career. Without the English department, I don't really know how I would have gotten through high school. They've gotten me the skills that I'm going to use for the rest of my life. I think arguably English is the most important subject, and like Quinn had just said, with the bigger class sizes, I don't think myself I would be learning as much, even though this isn't affecting me. I mean, I guess just what I'm trying to say is, like, I have experienced all the English that York has to offer, and the quality of it is so tremendous, and I'm concerned with that quality decreasing. I'm also concerned with the fact that some of the teachers that have been let go I'm not supposed to make this personal, but like, those teachers are not only good teachers, but like, they're good people. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ryan Hinchley.
Hi, my name is Ryan Hinchley. I'm a current senior at York High School, and I agree with Mike, Quinn, and what Paige have said. I love the English department, but I'm here to cover a different topic, which is our baseball coach, Coach Kalal. I'm a current player of his, and we have the whole team out here to support him. And it's been taken to my attention that the school board has made some necessary budget cuts in order to free up debt space and ultimately to keep the school running smoothly and effectively. Well, in this case, it's quality is greater than the quantity. And when it comes to teaching, it's hard to come across that special one that the students have respect for and has the ability to get the necessary work done while giving the student the equal amount of respect. Coach Kalal definitely abides those guidelines, and the recent news of being cut from the payroll is utterly absurd, and speaking on behalf of the student body and the baseball team, you, the school board, have made a huge mistake. As a young adult at the age of 18, I know that everybody makes mistakes, and you have to learn to forgive that person, and you have a second chance to redeem themselves. You're about to lose a wonderful teacher and coach, and even a greater person. If you ask anyone around this school about Mr. Dave Colau, there would be nothing but good words said about him. As a baseball player, I have a handful of people come up to me every day telling me how lucky I am to have him as a coach. And I tell them, I sure am. It's hard to find people like him. He truly understands what's best for the team and us as individuals. I'm not kidding either. Every day I have people come up to me and say the exact same quote. Even York staff says the same about Colau. He's such a team player when it comes to him during the field and at his workspace. Everyone around him feels comfortable knowing such a caring man is there for him and for any necessary help. Without him in the school environment, there's going to be an empty, cold feeling roaming the halls. Nothing beats receiving a giant greeting from him during the day and simply cannot be replaced by anything else. That was just the effect he has on the school. It goes hand in hand with people he's dealt with the baseball program here at York. For starters, he put York baseball on the map. People want to play with us because we have a great team, beautiful facilities, and we were taught to play the game with class, the right way. All of this is due to Coach Colau working his tail off, exhibiting his passion in all three of these main topics. If it wasn't for him, we would still be a mediocre program like we have been in the past, not naming any names or anything. Mark my words, within 10 years, we will have another state championship ring on his finger, along with his 2005 Naperville Central title. Without him, we wouldn't be much, especially myself. From day one, he stepped in at York. He preached how the program is a family and how he's fulfilled the role as a leader of our family. By taking him away, you're breaking up our family. Thank you for your time. I hope our voice is heard, and I hope you reconsider your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Kelly Gazewski. Kelly Gazewski.
My name is Kelly Guzheski. I am not a student. I feel bad I didn't bring my kids. I am a citizen of Elmhurst, and I'm also a teacher at Emerson School. And on Friday, March 18th, 10 teachers were let go from our small school. I was one of them. I've been teaching fourth grade for 3 years, and I love what I do, absolutely love it. I think about those 21 kids 24/7. For the last 3 years, I've devoted my life to the school district. Now, I didn't tell my kids that I was let go. Nobody knows, because they're 10 years old. So I don't have anybody here to speak for me. But I know that what we shouldn't do as a community is we should not lay off more people than we need to, ever. And in this case, we have. Layoffs hurt people physically, emotionally, financially. And it's cruel, it's absolutely cruel to tell someone that they've lost their job only to give them a possibility that maybe in May you could apply before the general public gets a chance for your job back. This is not an honorable process. Whether it was created by one side or the other because of negotiations to do something this cruel, or whether, as someone told me, we do this because it's always been done this way. All schools do this. We are just one of many schools that are getting rid of teachers. Doesn't mean we do that in Elmhurst. As a citizen, we need to relook at what we do to people and the effect that it has on them, and change it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Maggie Quigley.
Hi, I'm Maggie Quigley. I'm a York senior. The rifting of many of the teachers that I've had and that are present today is really irresponsible. We understand that we must save money in the district, but lowering the quality of our education and removing dedicated teachers is not a way to do so. The removed teachers have impacted, or removing these teachers will impact students negatively. Sorry, I can't read my own handwriting. Many of these educators teach specialized classes, and there are several classes that will be removed or cut next year because we've lost these teachers. It will severely hinder the learning process. Currently, I'm a student of 3 of the teachers that have been rifted and a former student of many that have. I cannot begin to fathom these classes missing these teachers, and even begin to imagine these losses. Removing these teachers will not solve the problem. It will increase class sizes and provide less opportunity for students to get adequate one-on-one attention necessary for the learning process. This holds especially true for English classes, where the curriculum is built around discussion and writing. And one more thing, I would not be able to get up here and have the confidence to speak in front of this board without these teachers. I have been taught how to form an argument and translate my ideas to words with what these amazing educators have done. I ask you to please reconsider these cuts at all levels, not for me, but for the future generations of York students and District 205 students.
Sorry, our next speaker is Haley, and I'm having a hard time with the last name. Hello.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Haley Halleck, and I'm a junior at York High School. And in my 16 years of life, I've realized English is the sole base of our intelligence. Being less literate than the rest of the world will ultimately make anyone's life extremely difficult. I'm not saying that we will be illiterate without these teachers, but I am saying that the English department is losing a major asset of people which help York students look deeper into what they're capable of. These teachers have pushed students to a point where they are not just acceptable, but exceptional. These teachers are the future of York's English department. Getting rid of them would be a poor decision on anyone's part. Yes, I do have a personal experience with one of these teachers. And yes, he is a nice guy, and all of his students love him. But more importantly, he has taught me. Although not every student may have had him, he has opened those explicit students up to a whole new world of thought. And those students could find themselves through that one class. They are inspired by this man to grow up and make something of themselves. One person from his class could change the world. One person. Let's face it, English is the center of our lives. To do anything, we need to be able to read, and from that, to write. Taking away English teachers will weaken the English department at York as a whole. Along with this, teachers in general are our future. Why, of all things, would someone weaken the sole base of our education? Because honestly, there is a lot more ways to save money. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Drew Bendelow.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Bendelow. I reside at 490 Parkside in Elmhurst. And as an Elmhurst resident, a District 205 parent, and a teacher with 17 years' experience in the district, I'm here this evening to express the concern of myself and my colleagues regarding the potential impact of the proposed reduction in force on student learning. When the board accepted the EPIRT recommendation to reduce 4.6 full-time York faculty positions at its March 8th meeting, they also noted that the average class size would only increase to 26.8. As the EPIRT report on class size indicates, these potential class size increases are well above the 20.4 average of high-performing suburban high schools in our area. Well, given this information, we are concerned that the most frequently occurring class size of core English classes is already 28 students per class. As the York English department alone will lose 6 teachers who collectively teach 30 classes and serve nearly 700 students, there's almost certain potential for a significant increase in the core English classes that serve the majority of York students. There's been much discussion about the impact of class sizes on student learning, and my colleagues and I would like to offer you the National Council for Teachers of English statement on the need to limit the size of individual language arts classes in order to afford our students the best possible learning opportunities. This statement cites that increased teacher-student contact and also decreased retentions, decreased referrals to special ed, decreased dropouts are some of the greatest benefits of reduced class sizes. These benefits are what we want for all of our students as they navigate through 4 years of English at York. And speaking personally, as a parent, I know that my daughter should be sitting in a class with the optimal pupil-teacher ratio. We thank you for your time, and we appreciate the board's consideration of the impact on student learning when considering the interdependent issues of staffing and class sizes. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, to all of our speakers and those who have communicated in other ways, the topics that all of the individuals speaking tonight brought forth are things that are agenda items, so we invite you to stay and follow the discussion. We will have some board discussion as well as introduction by the administration as far as that process goes. And with that, we will move on with our agenda. We are going to make a slight change in order under superintendent's communication. We'll do the insurance renewal update first.
And I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Masterton, who will introduce our representatives from Lockton, who will be doing a presentation for you this evening.
The insurance committee has been working very hard this year again to ensure that we keep our costs down and do the best we can for our staff in terms of our coverage. And this would be our annual renewal presentation. I would like to introduce to you Paul Davidson, who is our Lockton representative, and he'll talk to you about our annual review of health and dental insurance.
Good evening. My name is Paul Davidson with a partner in Lockton Companies, located in Chicago. And we just have a short presentation today with really just the highlights of pretty much 4 or 5 months worth of crunching numbers to try to get to the optimal insurance program for the district going forward. And so, as you can see from the first slide, about 70% of the cost of medical coverage is in the PPO program and about 30% in the HMO. And we're proud that we worked hard to get to a place where there's an overall 1.65% increase in benefits this year. And just to put that in context, medical trend is about between 11 and 12%, has been for the last 2-3 years. So it's very good. This is what we consider a home run renewal for any group that we work with. Just more specifically on the HMO side, there is going to be a 10.7% rate increase. And we wanted to put some context around, and I hope there's nobody from Blue Cross in the room, because they've really given the district a good deal over the last really 5-6 years. And so, if you look over the history, each and every year, the district essentially has won in that premiums were less than claims plus the fixed cost to run the program. So we felt that, you know, we got them down as low as we could to 10.7%. And on the next page, we're just showing what, so we made no changes in plan design for the coming July 1st renewal. And we just wanted to show the district change in cost as well as the employee contribution change in costs, and both on a total as well as a monthly basis, or actually pay period basis, excuse me. The PPO has run very, very well over the last 2 years, and so we were able to keep the rate of increase actually at a flat. So we're budgeting for the exact same level that we did in this current fiscal year. And so, you know, in essence, employee contributions aren't changing and benefits are not changing. Okay? And then dental actually has been running also very well, and people are getting their teeth cleaned, and but not much else, and which is good. And so we're able to show a decrease this year in funding, which contributes to the overall, you know, net 1.65% increase. Okay. In terms, as everybody is aware, health reform has taken place in the last 12 months. And so some of the changes that are required under Health Reform Act do need to take place this year. And so lifetime maximums are going away on the PPO. Dependents will now be able to, dependents of employees, whether married or unmarried, will be able to be covered under the program to age 26. Pre-existing conditions clauses have gone away for children up to age of 19. And for the flexible spending account, over-the-counter medications are no longer able to be reimbursed through that program. There are several other changes that would cause the company, the district, that we looked at, and that would cause them perhaps to lose grandfathering status. And so we kind of listed some of the major things that would cause the district to lose grandfather status, and made the decision that in the best interest of the district and the employees, until health reform becomes more clear in terms of what all of the rules and regulations will be coming 2014, that we do have the luxury of being able to keep our grandfathering status, keep the benefits the same, and again, keep funding the same. And so I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve the district and the board, and just want to open it to any questions.
I am going to say thank you for putting the presentation together for us. I think it's good news to see that we've had favorable experience. In here, you're looking more at the cost analysis. Do you look at anything as far as cost containment? Do you bring forth any recommendations in regard to that?
Yes, there have been over the last 3 years that we've been involved with the district. We've really looked at utilization really of both the HMO and the PPO programs. We have recommended some, you know, there's been wellness activities that we've recommended and some communications activities towards wellness. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I know last year we did make some benefit plan changes to, you know, both to encourage people to take care of conditions that weren't, you know, people weren't being compliant with their recommended care. So yes, we have looked at a bunch of things, and so.
Mr. Kralquist?
I didn't see in the material, perhaps, Dr. Krizik or Pat, can you comment on what our overall mix is in terms of the utilization of the different plans and any trend lines there? We see, for example, the HMO is increasing at 10.7%, but can you put that in the context of what how the employees are utilizing the PPO versus the HMO?
The PPO, we have about 70, I think it was 70% of our employees are on the PPO plan. And it's kind of interesting because HMOs traditionally have been a less expensive option. Well, now because so many people have gone to HMOs, there's sort of been some adverse selection to the point that now HMO costs are rising steadily and PPOs are leveling out. one of the things that we've done as well is we have two different HMO offerings, HMO Illinois and HMO Blue Advantage. HMO Blue Advantage actually is less expensive and offers better benefits for our employees. But it had in the past a rather limited amount of doctors and hospitals that were part of HMO Blue Advantage as compared to HMO Illinois. One of the biggest providers is Advocate Healthcare, and that was not part of Blue Advantage. Well, Advocate has now come on to Blue Advantage, so we are going to be putting a major push on our employees, because it's good for them and good for us, to move over to Blue Advantage. What that will do probably next year is HMO Illinois' costs will kind of level out a little bit, but we will see a rise in HMO Blue Advantage costs and claims because of the fact that some of, again, that adverse selection will be going forward from there. So sooner or later, we're going to plateau where the HMOs will not be or will only be as beneficial to employees as the PPOs. And then it'll be a really interesting change and to see what we can do from there in terms of cost containment. And as far as what Mrs. Ostachek had asked, we raised in particular HMO quite a bit because the costs were going up. We raised our co-payments. We raised our co-payments on pharmaceuticals, which has been one of the most expensive things, is the prescriptions and the drug cards that we have. So we raised the co-pays on all of those, whereas the Blue Advantage is much less. And yet we still didn't have people necessarily move over. So we're going to do a better job this year of really communicating with our employees the advantages of moving to Blue Advantage out of HMO Illinois, and we hope to save some more money that way, at least to start with.
Thank you. Mr. Collins?
Ms. Masterton, the projected increase in just the HMO option is $192,000 roughly to the district and roughly $85,000 to employees. With a shift to HMO Blue Advantage, would you expect those numbers to change at all?
I would expect that our costs will go down, probably if we can move people to it. We have currently about, I want to say in my head, at our last meeting we said 80 employees who are on HMO Illinois now, who would be served exactly the same way but with better benefits through Blue Advantage. So moving those 80 in there could provide us with some additional savings as well. So it might even end up being less than that in terms of the actual cost. Our enrollment, our open enrollment starts is the month of May, and with an effective date of June 1st, or is it July 1st? July 1st, I'm sorry, July 1st. So that'll be next year's fiscal cost that hopefully will be a little bit better, a little extra money there to help.
And I thought I might add that we actually did an analysis of actually dropping HMO Illinois and just kind of forcing people, and that wouldn't be, that's kind of a last-ditch effort, quite honestly, because we do want to provide choice, but it actually turns out less cost-effective to the district by marrying the two plans. And so, we think it's best for employees to have choice, and certainly not every employee physician or hospital is in the HMO Blue Advantage program, and so we want to keep that choice. But even more importantly, we're not spending any money to have that choice, and so I just want to make that point.
Thank you. Any other board questions or comments on this? Again, we'd like to thank you for the service that you provided to our district.
Okay.
And the analysis you brought to us.
Thank you.
We're going to move forward back in the order of the agenda to the annual technology update presentation. Dr. Krizik?
Every time about this year, David Smith and Kathy Baker put together a presentation that shares with you some of the accomplishments that have been made in both the instructional technology arena as well as just in our infrastructure changes that have been implemented within the past year. So I'm going to now turn this over to Kathy Baker and David Smith to provide you with our annual 2005 technology update.
Okay, well, thank you for the opportunity to give you another update on the technology program. Kathy and I will share the duties tonight to give you the overview and also answer any questions that you might have at the end. First, I'd like to start with a summary of some of the key findings out of the technology EPERT program review. One major finding was that the technology program, the outcomes and the activities are aligned strongly with the strategic plan, and that's also true for our technology integration plan, which we file with the state of Illinois every 3 years. With this year, the fiscal year 11 budget is about 86% funding the basics that we need, the infrastructure, hardware, software, and services that we provide. For this year's budget, the additional amount was what funded some infusion of new technologies this year to classrooms and infrastructure projects and operational projects that help move the district forward. And you'll see some of that in an upcoming view graph as to what that represents. Our district average student-to-computer ratio is at 2.8 students per computer, and that is just slightly under the national average, which, by the way, is declining slowly as well, so we're kind of chasing each other. And I attribute that mostly to trends around the nation of going towards either low-cost computing devices, or a lot of districts are going to the 1-to-1 ratio and trying that, and actually entire districts are heading in that direction in some areas. So that's something that we would want to obviously keep our eyes on as in times when budgets would permit that. The technology support ratings from our annual survey continue to be high, and you'll see that later. The last couple of years of funding have really, in a large way, gone toward, in terms of classroom technology, have gone towards the display and the interactive technology with the LCD projectors and document cameras, which are basically universally available in almost every instructional space at this point. So other interactive technologies you'll see include interactive whiteboards or clickers and some other things that are showing up in pockets, but that's mostly through either grants or donations or building purchases, not so much from district initiative at this point. That would be something we would want to organize and coordinate with the curriculum area to work that, a district-wide sort of initiative in the future. A couple of other points that came out of the program were that one of the key things with technology rollouts, and this is really recognized best practice, would be to provide more just-in-time, site-based instructional support for teachers for the use of technology with instruction. That would help provide teachers the help they need, the type of help they need when they need it, and in smaller pieces that would enable them to consume that and digest that instructional support and use it in the classroom effectively. Another point that was recognized was, as all districts in the country are really facing, is the reliance on data, the number of systems that are out there, the number of systems that we have, the number of disparate databases and where the data resides, and being able to pull that together, help teachers, help principals pull that together, analyze that data, and make well-informed decisions with that. So that's obviously an issue that we're struggling with as well. So with that, I'd like to turn over the presentation to Kathy for the instructional piece.
Am I going? There we go. We continue to focus on national educational technology standards to promote the transformation of the classroom instruction for 21st century learning. NETS A provides framework for administrators, NETS T for teachers, and NETS S for students. So NETS, you'll hear me refer to, is the National Education Technology Standards. These 6 strands that you see is just the basics of NETS S. Big ideas need to be made even simpler so that implementation can occur quickly. So it took a kindergarten teacher to kind of break it down. And basically what we want our students to do is to create, share what they know through collaboration, understand information literacy and be able to communicate that information to others, solve problems with critical thinking, protect their online identities with an understanding of internet safety and digital citizenship. Well, this seemed to work well, so what we did was we went into the NETS T and we broke that down as well. So very simply, we want to continue to ask our teachers and help support them to inspire, design, model, promote, and engage students in a very digital world. And then we get up into the administration. NETS A acknowledges that a need for administrators to create and sustain a culture that supports digital age learning by leading, continuing to learn, excelling in professional practice, being a part of systemic improvement and continuing to evolve into global learners. And to support NETS for students, teachers, and administrators, we continue to provide a variety of supports such as various online learning modules and various professional development opportunities. Internet safety and digital citizenship remains to be very important, and new this year was participation in the FBI SOS Safe Surfing site by Emerson, Fisher, and Churchville schools. Third grade students from Emerson and fourth grade students from, oh, that should say Fisher, I'm sorry, not Field, it should say Fisher up there, took the nation and participated in the September edition and came out first. So both Fisher and Emerson were able to get visits from the FBI, and it resulted in a celebration for a job well done. This is a list of the tools that are offered within our district to promote communication and collaboration for both staff and students. We have students as young as kindergartners now blogging, and Edmodo, a safe social networking application, is now a part of our middle school curriculum, as well as being available to grades K to 12. iPads and iPods push learning to break away from the traditional path and increases the students' engagement. We are just starting to understand what iPods and iPads can do for our students, with a set of 5 iPods currently at Fisher School, 10 iPads brought in to serve the needs of our special ed students, and 2 iPads with our earliest learners over at Madison. We continue to use NWEA MAP assessment along with other digital assessments. And the biggest change that we've seen this year is an increased request from teachers and administrators to get that data into the hands of the classroom instructors as soon as it's available. The more information that we have about our students, the clearer the picture is about achievement and where gaps may occur. This graph shows a variety of 12 student tech profiles aligned to NETS S. The proficiency scale is 0 through 4, with 3 being proficient and 4 being very advanced. And we are starting to see grades 2 and 5, which is the kind of the green and the orange bars, to get to the proficient level and beyond in some categories. We brought laptop carts out to the middle schools in the fall of 2009, so increased access is a little bit new still for them. This data shows that we need to continue to strengthen the support and perhaps look at different models of delivery to increase student access to technology at the middle school level. And so we will continue to align technology skills to the Common Core standards and NETS S during the 2011 and 2012 school year, and set specific technology expectations at each grade level with benchmarks at grade 2, 5, and 8. And here's just a very simple example of a grade 2 lesson where the student changed format, inserted a picture, used keyboarding, and we know if we have every grade 2 student take this lesson to heart, that the grade 3 teachers will understand the skill levels that come in as they cross that threshold. Another piece of data that we look at is from the Computer Concepts and Skills Proficiency Test, which allows students to test out of the course at the high school level. This test was revised in 2010 to reflect Office 2007 skills and was actually made much more difficult than in previous years. This year, a higher percentage of students passed the test as depicted by that blue data line. We also recognize a need to increase keyboarding capabilities of our students. We are previewing Type to Learn 4 software later this week, and our plans are to have keyboarding programs available in our K-5 buildings as well as at the homes this fall. The move to 21st century libraries include making sure that appropriate online resources and training to use digital resources are available. We hope to increase access to digital books and online tutorials for our staff and students in the next school year. And as we build our professional learning community, we continue to ask ourselves, did the students learn to collaborate, communicate, create, and share new information? And I'll turn it back to David.
Thank you. Now we're going to turn our attention back to some numbers and some nuts and bolts. This graph depicts the trends of the tech budget over the last few years, and you can see that for the fiscal year 8, 9, and 10, there was a tremendous increase in infusion of funding to support some very major infrastructure improvements, operational improvements, and classroom technology improvements, a lot of our communication systems and so on. A lot of things have been upgraded over the years, and we've gone over that in the past, and there's some, we'll allude to some of that in a future view graph, but that's what enabled that to happen. And you can see that in this current year's budget, there was a approximately $680,000 net reduction that was comprised of a $550,000 budget decrease plus a technology fee increase that was instituted this year. So the net amount of that was a $680,000 net decrease. And then, of course, with the EPERT process for this coming year, next year's budget will go down again another $414,000 to $3.4 million. The total then reduction over the 2 years is about $1.1 million. At that level, that does allow us to continue to sustain what we have. That's getting close to the level below which we would start to have some, I think, reverse direction. But right now, at that level is about what we can afford to do. The there's not any room for any additional new infusion of technology. We'll talk about that in a minute, but that, I think, under the current circumstances, is probably appropriate. Just to give you an idea, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I will mention the level 2 column represents what would have been the plan of record if we had a level budget this year. The 10.8% reduction represents the reductions that are coming through the EPERT process. The main line I want to point out is the equipment line, which is over $250,000 reduction. That represents two things mainly. One is the elimination of the classroom technology fund, and the other half really is elimination of some infrastructure projects, or not elimination, but deferral. You'll see that in a future upcoming view graph. A couple of points. At this stage, we will, for next year, we'll be at about 97% of our budget will be what you can call it fixed cost, kind of the costs that we need to carry forward the systems and services that we have in place today. We will continue the lease loan strategy for equipment purchases so that we try to maintain as predictable an annual payment cycle as possible. That's easier on the budget, easier on, you'll see what the importance of that in a minute. And of course, we need to continue to monitor and adjust our budget as priorities and needs change, because that happens all the time. With technology, not unlike a lot of other areas, things can come up and you need to make adjustments. This view graph I've shown before in past presentations. Just for reference, up in the corner, upper right corner, the green cells represent things that tend to affect student learning quite a bit. The yellow cells tend to reflect things that would affect teaching staff, but also students and learning. And then the white cells represent more or less infrastructure type initiatives. The check marks on the left side indicate things that are either completed or are in progress. So you can see that we've done a halfway decent job of meeting the goals that we've set for ourselves to accomplish and move the district forward. The main thing I want to point out for the 10-11 school year is the data warehouse reporting RFP that was issued, and we have about 13 responses that we've been analyzing. The curriculum and technology department reps have been looking at those. We've narrowed them down right now to about 3 or 4 that we think are sort of a finalist group that we think are close to meeting or the best match for what we're looking for. At this stage, though, I do think it's prudent to pause or to allow some of the new leadership that's coming to have a say and stake into what final steps we want to take to accomplish that. So we will memorialize the information, or it won't become stale. It's really fresh. It just came in recently, so I think we'll sum that up, and then as soon as we're able to, we'll continue to move forward on that in whichever way we can. In terms of 2011-12, I'm not going to go through this list, but I did want to point out a couple things. You'll see the strikeouts, and those represent projects that will be deferred or picked up at some later time as budgets permit. Some of the, I really won't say much about that. I mean, there are some either infrastructure projects or pilots of new technology that we were hoping to pull off this coming year in order to help us figure out how to move forward, but those will just have to wait under the circumstances. This view graph depicts really this trying to just impress upon you that if you look at the two left fiscal year 12 and 11 and 12, excuse me, those represent last summer and this coming summer in terms of computer refreshes. The total numbers of the blue and red. So there's about 300 last summer, about 300 computers this summer that we're refreshing. We're really in an ebb right now. We're really at a low point in terms of numbers because what's in front of us is 1,200 to 1,500 computers a summer for the next couple of years, starting with the summer of 12 and then going beyond that. However, the point I want to make there, the second bullet, is we need to be smart about how we approach this. I think there's many different ways to approach this. One might be we delay some, perhaps. The computers that are in good condition, we may want to consider relaxing our self-imposed parameters for refresh and maybe extending the life of those a little bit. We may want to look at lower cost devices as either, as one way to potentially either save money or be able to infuse more technology. And another option is what's called thin clients or desktop virtualization, which is a technology that's maturing quite a bit more now in recent years. And that might be another way for labs, especially for us to be able to take a different approach and have lower cost hardware and lower operational cost as well. They're easier to maintain. So we need to, I'm not looking at it necessarily, you replace a thing with a new thing every time something gets old. I think we need to be smarter about that. Just to summarize some of the support accomplishments, if you look at, this is an extension. Last year I showed these same graphs. I've added another year to these. If you look at the upper right in the blue, that's our computers are, again, we've more than doubled our computers in the last 4 years. We're at about 3,800 computers in the district right now. If you look at the green graph, the help desk tickets have took a big uptick over the years, and then we actually this year are seeing a decline. I think that's really attributable to a couple of things. One is we did not refresh as many computers this year, although we did touch a lot of them because we'd still re-imaged almost every computer. So we are touching them, but we're not necessarily changing them out. And the other piece is I think we're getting smarter and better at what we do, to be honest with you. We're working on that pretty hard, and so we're making some improvements there. If you look at the red graph, the black line represents a hypothetical scenario where if we would have continued the prescient support contract that we had years ago at the 3% cost of living increase, which is the standard thing they always wrote into their contracts. So it's a pretty, I think, reasonable hypothetical situation to assume. We would have been facing upwards of $700,000 if we had kept doing that year after year. So with the two restructures that we've done over the years, one being we pulled in the internal tech support, and we pulled that in internally, and secondly, we just restructured the network admin support just this summer. And the red graph represents the compensation for those after those restructures, and you can see that we're much lower. We're kind of hovering around $600,000 a year, and we've saved about $260,000 through this year on that. Customer satisfaction scores continue to go up. The summary there, the average is now 4.64 out of 5, and we continue to increase that annually, and we're very proud of that because we're working hard at that. We look at the results, and I appreciate everybody who's taking the survey and give us feedback, because my team will tell you we sit down and we look at the comments and we talk about it and we figure out what we're going to do to improve. So, and I think that's where some of these improvements come into play. So in summary, again, every year I want to say it again, we thank the community and the Board of Education for the support that we've had over the years. The district, I believe, is in a much better place technology-wise for the support that we've been giving. We continue to work on trying to increase the levels of student engagement through the NETS standards and other work that's going on that Kathy Baker alluded to focus on collaborating, communicating, creating, and sharing. Again, it's important to keep in mind that, especially in the future, as budgets permit, we should, I think, strongly look at finding ways to provide more site-based, just-in-time training and support for teachers with instruction using the technology if possible. We continue to try to become more operationally efficient and improve our service. And also, another point, the last point is that we have to recognize that next year there really will be no new technology, and I think that's appropriate. There are some subscriptions that will be reduced in the budget next year, but the impact, when I say subscriptions, I mean like content subscriptions, not like magazines, but I mean like, for example, online digital materials. The impact of that will be felt more in fiscal 13 because if the renewal isn't paid next year, then it expires. So we'll feel that impact more in the following year, actually. And so those are some of the key points that we wanted to make. And thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free.
Thank you to both of you for bringing this information forth. We saw some of the technology information when we went through the EPIRT process, but I think it's great to really see the whole picture. I will open it up to any board questions or comments. Mr. Carlquist.
First off, I want to say, Mr. Smith, Ms. Baker, Dr. Krizik, Ms. Master, and anyone who, who plays a role with this, to compliment you on the state of the district when it comes to technology, given this, the caveat that you said, the resources that you have. I would say, in terms of my subjective assessment, qualitative assessment, that 205 is in the best shape that it has ever been when it comes to both the infrastructure and access to technology and the portfolio of applications and so on and so forth. Of course, with that having been said, it's a little bit like saying my wardrobe is in the best shape it's ever been in. Wear and tear wears away at that, and sometimes your requirements, change over time.
Thank you for the
and you need to
reference there. I
continue to refresh or address that. And you've been very clear in terms of some of the concerns that you have. One in particular, and I'm reiterating somewhat what you pointed out, but I think these are, for me, some of the most important takeaways. One is the fact that we're not refreshing the equipment. That's a deferred expense. That's like, in some respects, neglecting capital needs or maintenance in facilities and the like. The need to refresh that technology, to infuse new capability, will remain. It's being pushed off, and we need to make sure that we're keeping that in mind. Second observation of your presentation had to do with the data that was being collected around the grade 8 computer concepts proficiency exam. That obviously, I think, is the increase in just a few short years of 53% passage, in contrast to the 16% of just a few years ago, is not only, I think, a quality reflection of the capabilities and the access, the capabilities that our students have, I think, attributable to the access and the curriculum and so forth. But the other side of that, the double-edged sword on that, is that because we have students who have access to technology and are going through, acquiring those skills earlier and earlier, that's going to put even more pressure on our ability to provide those tools to more and more students sooner, and in their educational career, which will put pressure on access in terms of systems and networking and skills, and which comes right back to the budget. Third thing is, and I'm wondering, Mr. Smith, if you can just even elaborate a little bit more than you did, because I think the third takeaway that's very important is, you talked about your operating costs, or about 86% of your budget goes towards maintaining status quo, the infrastructure, salary, and the like, and that's fairly common across an industry from an IT expenditure standpoint. And what everyone tries to figure out is, how do you contain that, how do you reduce that, so that you have incremental margin to invest in new capabilities that you really want to drive forward. You brought up one area where you thought that could be achieved was in the area of virtualization, thin client, which I think not only drives down cost of hardware, but frankly has the potential of going a long way towards reducing operating costs, because it's much easier to maintain system images and support and help and the like. Do you see, and I'm not looking for you to sort of reinforce why you brought that up and why you think that may be a good idea. I think it is and could be. But could you just maybe touch on how you see, given that we're going into this next year of a freeze in capital, how you would help lead the district towards that as a possible, not necessarily making a commitment, but a possible direction as a way of improving greater access and reduce cost? Do you see this next year as this moratorium of sorts, as giving you some breathing room to do some studies, some evaluations, some proof of concept? How will we get to that possible future?
Yeah, that's a good question, because in an ideal world, we would actually have a budget line item that would say desktop virtualization pilot, and there would be funds there that we would set up pretty as close to what a real configuration would look like, so that we can really test the technology and make sure that, because the thing about desktop virtualization is it doesn't always work the same for every lab. I mean, a math lab might be different than an English lab and different than a CAD lab, and so you can't. It's not possible to really say that one solution will work as well in every situation. So our challenge is to say, okay, with that technology, where can it be applied within the district safely and make it actually work to our advantage? Where the operational cost is lower and so on. In some labs, it may not be possible, so we need to figure out where's that line that we don't want to cross. But to answer your question, without that budget line item, because obviously that was removed, our thoughts are we do have some servers. What we're going to basically do is try to still piece together a pilot, kind of a MacGyver system, so to speak, where we're going to take some servers that are coming offline, some of the desktops that might be either retired, or we might set up like a temporary lab that's really built out of technology that's being retired. Instead of disposing of it, we can set up a lab and get some things going and try it out on a smaller scale. It may not apply directly to what it would look like in the end, because we're not running on the proper types of servers and things like that. But I think we can get a really good idea. We can learn. One of the keys for my team is to not only learn, get more familiar with the technology, but we have to learn how to operate it. It's kind of like, probably a bad analogy, but like if you're a space shuttle pilot, they're not going to sit down in a space shuttle and say, go fly it. You get a lot of time training on it and things like that. So if we had even a mock-up sort of lab that we could put together, then my team can get used and familiar with the software and learn how to really use it, so when the time comes, we're ready to go. We're not just starting from square one. So that's one idea I have. A piece of good news on this really is that we did do the server virtualization piece, which I didn't really mention explicitly, but we do have a virtualized server environment now with forgive me for the technology stuff for those of you that don't really care about or understand this kind of thing, but we have a SAN storage area network now with a couple different speed disks, and we also have 3 virtual servers running that we're now starting to migrate physical servers to a virtual server environment. And that does what you alluded to on the desktop side, except it does it on the server side. So we're able to, now in the future I'm anticipating we may have 25% of the number of servers or less in the future that we have today. So our server rack space will be much less, and the operations for that and the power and so on will be reduced over time. But that environment, in that environment or similar environment, we would deploy the desktop virtualization and something, or that we would leverage that technology to help with the desktop virtualization. So it's a long answer, but I think we're going to have to just try to do the best we can with what we have for now, in the absence of having the funds to really sort of do a full-fledged pilot. And then when we have the money for a full-fledged pilot, we might be, I think the net effect of all this might be, we may have to extend some of the labs a little bit longer than we had hoped to in order to have time to put together a legitimate virtualized desktop virtualization environment. That's the net effect, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Just a quick question and observation. Your graph showed that you are improving your service and decreasing your costs. And you mentioned that you do it by the use of surveys and studying those surveys. Could you just spend a minute talking about what that survey entails and how you analyze it? And my real point is here is I'm looking for a way for our district in general to increase the use of surveys, increase that analysis, and provide better service at lower costs throughout the district. So I'm trying to learn from you.
Okay. I'll do my best. First of all, I try to keep it simple. It's a very short survey. Really, it's only about 4 or 5 questions. We tried to focus in on what matters most for support. The turnaround time, the getting the problem solved right the first time, our professional interactions with the staff, things like that. So we try to look at a few different areas. And the other thing that we did was we try to keep it the same every year so that we can do the comparison. It's tempting to always add in more questions, and we may do that at some point, but really we try to keep it simple and keep it consistent. So from year to year to year, you can really see what's the real change. I'd like to get as much staff input as possible, because the more feedback you get, the more valid the results are. So it's a bit of a challenge sometimes. I know everybody's busy, but we try to get several hundred staff responses back so that we have reasonable results. And then there's a comment section. We do this all through, it's done through a tool called Kia that we subscribe to. It's very inexpensive. I forget the cost. What is it? $50 a year, I think, we subscribe to this tool. So anyhow, then we close the survey, I take the results, and within a week or so, I try to schedule a meeting with my team, and we sit down. We look at each of the numeric results. We look at where the changes are. We talk about how that might have happened, and we actually literally read through the comments, and we try to categorize them into different categories of feedback, and we look for trends and in those comments as well. So actually, the comments are almost where we spend most of our time, to be honest with you. So for those of you that provide the comments, we really appreciate it, because honestly, that's where we spend most of our time. The numbers are interesting, and they kind of give us a high-level view, but the verbal feedback is what really sort of drives us.
And my second question is there work being done in the country about being able to benchmark the impact that technology has on learning, and is there a way to quantify that? Is there a way to make sure that the investment we're making in technology actually has an impact on student learning?
There is some talk about that out there. It's difficult to quantify. So I don't really have a really good answer for you. I do know that some of the research I've seen has to do more with that there's a sweet spot for getting the value out of technology comes with the support that you provide for teachers and for instruction, and elevating that skill level for everybody. That you can put the stuff out there, but without the support, it really doesn't have much of an impact. And also, depending on the technology, but like, for example, of interactive whiteboards, there's actually some studies that say you can overdo it. You can have technology that actually can interfere with achievement because it's just more of a distraction. It can be used too much, and really you're not getting to the essence of the curriculum. So I don't have a real good answer for you, other than there is some research that suggests that you have to get the right mix of the technology with the support and the curriculum integration. It all has to sort of be tied together. Otherwise, you're really just it gets a little bit too superficial in terms of your investment is a little. You have things out there, but what are you really doing with it? I don't have a good answer for you for how we can measure, how we can make those correlations. One idea I have is, and this isn't necessarily research-based, it's just an idea, would be there are some tools that I'm hoping to have in place next year that would give us more ability to analyze the technology use within the district. For example, the use of the actual computers in particular, and like not only that, but which programs are being used and how often they're being used. And so we would get more numerical information about the actual use of certain applications and programs, and that I was hoping, like with the data warehouse, we might be able to do some correlations in terms of can we draw conclusions about use of certain either amount of use or type of use that would help us understand different achievement patterns that we might see in the achievement data in the district. So I'm hoping that system, that once we have something like that in place, we can start to pull those pieces together and actually maybe draw some conclusions on how certain technology or the use of technology might be helping with achievement in our district. Yeah.
I have just a couple questions. When you were laying the outflow for your technology budget, you spoke about the $3.4 million being basically a budget to sustain, and that was reduced from 3.8, which was reduced from 4.5. Where would you say, I mean, when we lay out the plan and where we ultimately want to get to integrated classrooms, I mean, the technology isn't something that the kids go use, it's the space that they live in. I mean, what would you say, I guess, would be the dream number to get there? And then, you know, if you're taking a more conservative path, really, where should the funding level be? And you know, I know the various reasons, but we're at 3.4 next year because that's where we have to be based upon our fiscal resources. But really, where is the right funding level?
Well, I think that's a great question. I do believe that the peak that we had at that one time a couple years ago was pretty high peak, and maybe a little bit difficult to sustain that. We had a lot of infrastructure work to do, and I think we had to do some catch up, and I think we've accomplished that at least to some degree. So I think it's maybe a little bit the dream level would be closer to maybe the 3.8 million or possibly a little higher because, and you know, of course, I haven't. This is sort of I'm speaking maybe for myself here, or maybe Ms. Baker, but and some of the folks like on the EPER committee, for example, we felt that if there were additional funds that we would want to apply some of those to resources to help teachers, as opposed to buying more stuff. I mean, it would be a combination, for example, of maybe somewhere around the 3.8 or slightly higher that would help provide some additional instructional support, maybe some coaches certified staff that would have skills in that would help at the building level. So that, I think it would be a combination of adding some more of the interactive technologies or the mobile devices, things like that, infusing some more of that technology in, but then providing the instructional support with that. I don't really have a good number for you, but I would think it would be at that 3.8 or maybe slightly more than that, closer, maybe not the level 3 EPERT of, I forget what the number was at the time, because I forget what that number was, but it was maybe over $4 million, but somewhere between maybe 3.8 and $4 million would probably be a nice place to be.
I have a question. I'm going to direct it to Dr. Krizik. We've been trying to, as we've updated our curriculum, go to more curriculum with integrated technology. And I guess I'd look for just an opinion on how successful we've been at that. And depending on that answer, is it, if it's less than where we want to be, is it because we think we need more training or support or more equipment in the classrooms and so forth?
I'm going to turn that over to Dr. Sullivan.
Almost all curriculum now comes with a technology component. I don't think I've seen any almost recently that don't. Most of them now, though, are just electronic versions of the textbook, of which they're charging you the same amount as the textbook, at least currently. David and I have had lots of conversations about, the future. The predictions are that within at least 5 years, we'll have all textbooks online and more interactive than just a plain kind of textbook. So, we've had a lot of conversations about, where we should go with lower cost, one-to-one kinds of computing. And there are some states, like California right now, is looking at open source kinds of curriculum that are free. But in some cases, the jury's still out on what the quality is of some of those. So, but in the next few years, I think we'll be making decisions about, whether or not we should be looking at, one-to-one with online kinds of textbook resources.
Any other board questions or comments? Nope, seeing none, thank you very much. We appreciate the time and thought put into the report. Thank you. We are going to, I missed something here. We're going to move on to school fees. Dr. Krizik.
And Ms. Masterson's going to give you an overview of the recommendation that you'll be acting on later this evening. Some of the fees had been presented to you at prior meetings. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Masterson.
She did. Okay. As Dr. Krizik had said, many of these fees we have been discussing over the last three board meetings. So many of them have come out of the EPERT process. But as we move forward, and I'm going to ask Mr. Smith to put up the, I know you just got back to your thing. No, school fees, student fee proposal. The good news is that for various different reasons, one being that we're not really having too many adoptions that are expensive. In fact, we've only got really one adoption that we need to worry about in terms of cost, and it's very small. In fact, it's actually less, I think, than our current costs are. Because we have slightly larger class sizes in some instances, and some of our materials are classroom packages, and so with larger class sizes means that those classroom packages can go farther. And just in general, we're going to be going down in our fees a little bit for classroom instructional fees. In kindergarten, we're recommending a drop of $7 to $88 instead of $95. That's a drop of 7.37%. In grades 1 through 5, the 10-11 fees were $158. We're going to be recommending $134, which is savings of $24 for our parents for each student. That's a 15.19% decrease. And in grades 6 through 8, the 10-11 fees were $165. They would drop down to $138 for a $27 savings 16.36% decrease. On the other fees, what we like to call the extracurricular fees, instructional music will now be all grades, as will be vocal music will be all grades, so that means middle school and high school. Previously, it was just middle school at 150 and 65 respectively. Now it will be the high school as well at 150 for instrumental music and vocal music at 65. Athletics at the middle school will continue to be $34.25 with no increase. Yearbook costs for grades 6 through 12 are at cost. We will continue to have the same technology fee and club fee that we've had this year at $35 for technology and $10 per club for all grades. There is a career tech lab fee in the high school that has been added as a result of the EPERT report of $25, and a high school art fee that has also been added as a result of the EPERT report at $26. We've also added an early and late activity bus fee. We had recommended $330. We've decided to split that out by semester, $165 per semester. It's a little more work, but not a lot, and it certainly will help students and parents who may have kids in fall sports but not in spring sports and don't need a whole year's worth of that late bus or activity bus in there. And then, of course, we've had some major changes into a tiered fee for athletics at the high school, where cross-country, boys cross-country and track will be $125. Cross-country for girls, track for girls, tennis, badminton, swim, wrestling, water polo, cheer, and soccer for girls will be $150. Soccer for boys, volleyball, baseball, softball, football, pom-poms, gymnastic, and bowling will be $175, and basketball and golf will be $200. We're also going to be recommending a 4-sport maximum. So we currently have basically a 4-sport maximum. It's $450 maximum cost per family, and if someone hasn't had that maximum applied to them, they need to let us know so that we can make sure that we give that refund back to whoever might that be. Yeah. But we will be implementing we'll definitely be implementing the 4-sport rule. So in a family, if there are 4 sports, then there's no charge for the 5th and beyond in there. And that would be our proposal for this year. And I will be happy to take any questions.
Ms. Conroy?
I was going to ask that question right away, so thank you. My other question, just in listening to you talk, is with the early and late bus, what happens to the kids that occasionally take the late bus home? Is that not going to be an option anymore?
I'm going to jump on the late bus question. So the cap on fees is only on the sports. So if you have 3 kids and they're in sports in both semesters, you'd pay 4 times $165. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're all clear on that. So, again, we're looking at this as increased revenue. This isn't something I don't think anybody here does with pleasure, but based upon the necessity that we have had, these are fees that we feel we need to increase at this point in order to retain the programs that we have. Are there any other board questions or comments? Ms. Conroy?
Just a comment in that we brought this up a couple meetings ago about school business partnerships, and I really would like to see us look into that a little bit more, and for the specific reason to try to help families with these costs. And we need to do a good job of that, because there's a lot of families in town that, may need help one semester or 1 year. There's a lot of people losing jobs or in between jobs, and it doesn't matter what tax bracket you're at. It's affecting everybody, and I'd really like to see us do that.
One of the things that we have done, and I think Mr. Rutter had talked about it, was looking into a partnership with Coca-Cola. And we have been working on a contract with Coca-Cola in which they will be providing us with some additional rebates on our products, which we expect will be in the range of approximately $60,000. Now, some of those rebates apply to food service because some of that works within there, but the rest of it would normally have applied to athletics. We've basically said that really should go in the Dukes in Need pot for exactly that, for bus or transportation fees, or for athletic fees, or for club fees, or whatever. And we're also encouraging York to think of new ways and different ways to do fundraisers that will go right into the Dukes in Need account and go from there. And then the other thing that I wanted to also, that I almost forgot to tell you, is that Mr. Smith, the people from York and our business office have been working on looking at a possible solution to the very high cost of textbooks at York. And we're looking at a virtual bookstore kind of solution. It may not happen right away this year, but we're hoping, within a year we may be able to do that. One of the things that we've talked about is through Follett, and one of the things that we've told them is we absolutely have to have some savings for our parents. That's our goal. It will also provide savings for the district in that we can be looking at some operational savings as well. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed and move forward with that and hope that that will help.
Just to add on to that, I think it's really important that we communicate that this isn't just for athletics. This needs to be for all the fees, music, buses, whatever it may affect the families.
Mrs. Deroni.
I'm delighted to see that the K-8 fees are going down. They're based on cost. We had to raise them last year because they were based on cost, and now we can drop them for those same reasons. The only ones that concern me are these creeping fees like the CTE lab fee and the high school art fee. Years ago, we got rid of all those little tacked-on fees. There was a $5 for this, there was $5 if you took this class, $10 if you took that class, and it just, those are the kinds of things that really inflated the bill, not that the textbooks don't, but we tried to really just cut all of those, and I'd hate to see them start creeping back. I understand why we need these, I understand where they came from, and I'm going to support them, but I would urge us as a board and administration, whoever of us might be here, to heed that, to be careful of those fees that creep in that way.
Mr. Kralquist.
I wanted to follow up on the subject Ms. Conrad had raised. Again, there were two parts to that, right? One was around sponsorship, which is around generating revenues, and the other is around hardships, which is Dukes in Need and the like. And with as much change as is forthcoming in the district in terms of leadership and board and the like, I just want to make sure that there's complete clarity in terms of who has responsibility, where do people turn if either they say, my company is ready to write a check, or privately, I have a hardship situation that I would like brought to someone for consideration, and so on. Where does that responsibility reside so that there's perfect clarity? Is that the athletic director? Is it the principal? Is it the central office? Where is that? Because when an EPER process goes on and the board says and the administration says we need to find ways to take 10% out, everyone works really hard and finds those reductions, but we can't then just go, phew, we're done, right? Because there are still these concerns that have been brought up by the board in some prior discussions. Either.
Well, like anything else, ultimately, the final approval, disapproval comes to the board. But really, opportunities for different activities really should come through the superintendent's office. That does not preclude schools from certainly going out and searching for different ideas, and the more people that do, the better it is for us. But there are some logistical issues always. There are ethical issues that sometimes come into play, and there are lots of times where great ideas seem like great ideas until you begin to see the repercussions of all of it. And that's why the superintendent's office and the business office, it's very important, because to make sure that those legalities are followed, that we follow the school code, that we follow the ethics laws that we have, and go from there. So I don't want to say that it shouldn't come from the athletic director or from the school. It starts there possibly. It can really start from anywhere, but ultimately it needs to come first, to the superintendent and then to the board to make a decision on whether that is the way that they want to go. Years and years ago, there was a lot of pushback over the idea that we don't want our students to be deluged with ads and propaganda, if you want to call it that, and marketing and all of the rest of it. And, when times are tough, sometimes that kind of thing goes away. So that's a decision that has to come, it's a policy decision. Truly it is. But procedurally and legally, that whole idea has to come through the superintendent's office.
Ms. Hirsch.
I just wanted to reiterate, from the board's perspective, in terms of policy, we direct the superintendent to recommend a schedule of fees. And the board really is silent, other than that, in terms of how to put together the fee structure. And I think through the EPERT process and through discussion at the board table, I think we've given the administration some direction in terms of values, if you will, of how to structure fees, in terms of shared sacrifice, looking at the new tiered structure for athletics. While it's very painful to look at increases across the board, I think we gathered the information and we put together a structure that attempts, although it's not something that we enjoy doing, attempts to share the expenses. It's the same rationale that we use for charging for textbooks and materials K through 8, and then of course obviously the families bear the brunt of the book fees at the high school. So I applaud the administration for soliciting board input and being consistent, although it's not something that we would want to do, is to impose fees, but these are valued programs, these are valued activities for our students. And in lieu of having to eliminate them or reduce them, we've attempted to come up with a way to be as equitable as we can to include and offer as many programs as we can for the students that we serve. So I applaud you, and it's difficult, but I do think that there is some rationale and there was some good thinking that went on in terms of trying to establish what the fee structure should be.
I'm going to just go to a comment Mr. Collins made, and it was more on the technology presentation about the surveys. I mean, when we started this budget reduction process and we were looking at cutting some of the athletic programs, we heard loud and clear, don't cut the program, increase the fees, we want to maintain all of this. And that's what this represents. It wasn't, we didn't do a survey, we heard input, and I think I would recommend to the board next year to really look at what the outcome of this is, because if we see drops in participation levels of these programs, maybe we've moved the needle too far. So I'm going to support this. I think this is what we heard from the people that we heard from. This is what we needed to do in order to balance things out. But I think the survey idea is a terrific one to get feedback. I'm particularly concerned about the bus and pack, because that really is a quadruple whammy on top of this. And kids may be able to afford the fees, maybe they can't do the transportation. To your point earlier, Mrs. Conroy, there are kids that just need it once in a while, and now we've eliminated that option for them. So again, I'm in support of this. I think that these were hard decision to make. I am concerned, and I would just recommend that this is something, as we're looking at this next year, we look at our participation levels of our kids and try to understand how much the cost and impact is driving that. Any other board discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our next superintendent's communication item, which is a discussion on the tentative fiscal 2012 enrollment.
And I'll let David put up the PowerPoint. Thanks, David. The FY12 staffing and enrollment plan was a process that actually that actually started several months ago, but came to some closure at the beginning of March. And what the process looked like is that John Carlson, our interim assistant superintendent for HR, had met with each of the building principals with regards to what their staffing plans for FY11 were and what FY12 was going to be based on a variety of different factors. So what I'd like to do this evening is just to give the high-level overview of some of the factors that have affected our FY12 staffing and enrollment plan, and then give the key highlights of each of the impact at each of the various levels at elementary, middle school, and high school, and then talk a little bit about our next steps. I will say before going forward that this is some of the hardest work that is done at the school leadership and district leadership level, because it is about ensuring that we maintain the integrity and quality of our programs given the resources that we have available to us. And so at times there will be some very difficult and challenging decisions that we'll be making going forward. The factors that have affected the enrollment plan for this year, there are actually 6 of them. Enrollment, and I'll talk a little bit about what some of the enrollment shifts are from 11 to 12. Some of the class size changes, the recommendation of the 5% reduction expenditures in class size based on the modified EPERT report, scheduling considerations when students take courses and how we put staff together, particularly our staff that travel, art, music, and PE, at the elementary and middle school level, along with world language and ELL staff at those levels, but also at the high school level when courses are offered, especially singleton courses or courses where there is maybe just a smaller number of students that have a particular interest in those courses. Staff certification is a critical issue in our staffing and enrollment plan. There are courses that require specialized certification, and there are levels that require specialized certification. We have the instructional strategy implementation impact. There are 2 examples, would be flexible grouping at the elementary level. We have implemented this past year block scheduling for literacy and math. That has an impact on the staffing and the enrollment plan. And then the freshman cohort at the high school has affected class sizes and certain configurations as we attempt to provide some interventions to kids who need some significant academic interventions. So that has an impact on the staffing and enrollment plan. And then there were the additional EPERT recommendations. So there were 6 factors that are taken into consideration with the FY12 plan. If we look at the key highlights of the elementary staffing plan, at this point in time, we are seeing 190 less students, K-5, for FY12 compared to FY11. And we're seeing the most significant drop in kindergarten. And so we had a higher number of 5th graders moving on to 6th graders, really being replaced by a lesser number of kindergarten students coming in. Now, we will see that 190 student level drop a little bit over time. It might balance out to about 150, but I think as we see new students move in and additional kindergarten enrollments, but I really do think that we're starting to see a further impact of the economy on our enrollment, as was predicted by Mr. Casarda in his Casarda A projections when he said there will be sustained impact on your enrollment over time should there not be a recovery to the economy. We are currently seeing 2.5 less kindergarten sections for FY12. However, there are 3 schools that could increase by 1 section, which would mean an additional 1.5 FTE. And there are 13 less 1 through 5, grades 1 through 5 sections, although there are 3 schools that could see increases in their sections based on enrollment and or other factors, particularly related to student achievement, as we take a closer look at some of our Title I schools. To just give you an overview of what this looks like, in FY11 we had 13.5 kindergarten sections. We're projecting 11. In 1st grade we had 29 this year. We're projecting 26. Second grade, there's a difference of 2 going from 31 to 29. In third grade, we're seeing a substantive shift from 30 to 26. We're seeing an increase in fourth grade from 25 to 28. There is a bubble of enrollment at that fourth grade level. And then we're seeing a significant drop in fifth grade from 30 sections to 23 sections for a total reduction of 15.5 sections K through 5. When we look at our district-wide class size averages, you will see there are no substantive changes in kindergarten, first and second grade. You will see some discernible changes in grades 3, 4, and 5, with the overall district average K5 moving from 21.7 to 24.1. When we look at elementary, again, this is just summarizing it in a different way. We currently need, this year we had 158.5 FTE staff, and that's just for core instruction. That does not represent our ELL staff, our speech pathologists, our special education staff, our our PE, art, or music staff. We're currently projecting 143 FTE sections, again, the reduction of 15.5. In this group of staff, we have 2 retirements, 1 resignation, and 2 non-tenured, non-renewal performance recommendations. And we are reducing a total number of 22 staff, but we will end up with 10.5 vacancies for FY12. And so you might ask the question, why are we reducing 22 staff if we basically have 15.5 reductions? And the answer to that is that there is no seniority in non-tenured staff. There's no seniority for a first-year non-tenured staff member, a second or a third, and or a fourth. And as a district, we chose not to the point made earlier, reduce all of our first through fourth year staff because of the impact that has on individuals. That's a hard thing to manage and cope with. But there weren't enough staff in between first year and second year non-tenured staff in core instruction to cover the 15.5 reduction. So we had to go into the third year. And so that's why there were more staff that are being on the honorable dismissal list than is necessary, because again, there is no seniority within non-tenured staff. And so as we have communicated to staff in multiple communications, sometime in late April, early May, we will be posting approximately 10.5 position vacancies. But as I've indicated, there's the potential of an additional 1.5 kindergarten sections, and there's an additional 5 sections that are on the bubble in regular grades, which could ultimately bring the total number of vacancies up to 18 for FY12. But we'll be monitoring those over time. At the middle school, the key highlights, there were no significant reductions in the number of sections of core instruction across the middle schools at this time. There were enrollment increases at the 6th grade, but not necessarily affecting the number of core instructions, core sections. There are vacancies at the 6-8 level, but until the building principals put the schedules together, the master schedules for those for their schools, we do not know what certifications are necessary for filling those positions. So it could be that we combine math and science, or we combine language arts and social studies, and we'd be looking for staff members that possess both of those certifications. So again, we need to be very careful about looking at certifications going forward. At the high school, Mr. Carlson really drilled down actually to the course level in looking at what the staffing and enrollment plan would be at the high school. That is based on student enrollment, course selection, and a variety of different factors, including some shifts to class size. In art, we're seeing an overall reduction of 0.4 FTE. In business, we're seeing no reduction next year. In English, we see a 2.2 net reduction to the English department. And for the same reason that at the elementary level that we needed to go into years 1, 2, and 3 and non-tenured, we also made those decisions in each of the departments as well. Because we did not have 3 full-time FTE first-year teachers in the English department to cover the 2.2 reduction. We needed to go to the next level, and it was in the third year. And with the exception of looking at positions that required additional certification, i.e. a reading specialist that might have differentiated the non-tenured staff, all of those staff were treated equally. However, again, once all of those schedules are put together, there will be staff that will be reemployed at the high school. And so as challenging as this is, and as frustrating as it is for both staff and for students, there is no other equitable or fairer way to do this, because again, there is no seniority within the non-tenure ranks. In family consumer science, there's no net reduction. In industrial tech, there's a 1/10 of a reduction, but we realistically can't take that. That reflects a semester course. So in reality, there is no reduction to industrial tech. In math, there is a net reduction of 1.7. In PE, a 0.367 reduction. We currently have mostly full-time staff, and so what ends up happening in physical education is you have to reduce a full-time staff member to cover the 0.367 spread. And once schedules are put together, that might end up being a 0.67 or a 0.7. We don't know that yet, based on actual enrollments and staffing plans. But we also have to look at the existing certifications of all other staff members, including tenured staff members, and that has an impact on the reduction in force as well. The performing arts is similar to industrial tech. We have a 1/10 reduction. We can't capture that, and so there's really a net zero reduction there. In science, there's a 0.9 reduction. In sectioning, in social studies, a 0.8. In world language, a 0.9, for a total of 7.267. At the end of the day, when the schedules are done, that's really what the reduction should look like, is 7.267. That's what it should look like after all the scheduling is done. It might be higher than that, it might be slightly lower than that. That won't be determined until all the final student sectioning is finalized. So our next steps in the process is that you as a board, have to, certainly with a heavy heart, approve the honorable dismissals and reduction in force recommendations this evening that are being recommended as a result of enrollment, staffing, and budgetary information. So that's this evening. The elementary principals need to create a master block schedules to determine the allocation of art, music, and PE staff. There are a variety of part-time staff that have also been reduced as a result of that, as well as some full-time staff in those areas. And so we need to know what is the FTE that we need to bring back in order to ensure that we can maintain the literacy and math blocks at the elementary level. The middle school principals need to finalize the student schedules to determine the open positions, as well as then what the certifications are necessary for those positions. The high school staff need to do the exact same thing. They need to finalize the student schedules to determine open positions and certifications necessary. We will be posting vacancies for new positions, those positions that require specialized certifications. So the additional 4.0 reading specialists, 3 at the middle school, 1 at Fisher, the full-time elementary reach teachers, and the 1 full-time psychologist. Those will come out sometime either before or right after spring break, if some of them haven't been posted already. We will be posting the elementary and middle school and high school vacancies internally in late April and early May, once we know what those exact vacancies are and we know what the certifications necessary are for them. We will review the student achievement at our Title I schools to evaluate if there is a need for any additional sectioning for FY12. We'll do that in June. And then we will continue to monitor enrollment in kindergarten, as well as all of our other grade levels, April through August. So that's really just the high-level overview of the staffing and enrollment plan. I'd like, if I could capture in the number of hours that have been put into this, a significant number of hours have been put into this staffing plan. And it will undergo some changes once schedules are put into place and as we see shifts in enrollment going forward. So at this time, I'll open it up for questions.
On behalf of the board, I would like to thank you and Mr. Carlson and the entire team for the tremendous amount of work. And also, I know that the principals had the difficult task of talking to the staff members, so we need to recognize that. I think the process that you put together was very thoughtful, and I think you looked at a lot of different components here. I have one question, and you know, I'm not sure if the answer really matters other than for my edification. You know, when we're looking at the grade levels, I think we could have a pretty good idea of where the next grade level is going to come, and I'm assuming that between second and third, that it's really higher class sizes that are having the impact. How are you looking at the kindergarten? Is that based upon actual enrollment, or is that based upon a projected? And I'm going to make it a two-parter. If it's based upon actual and we're looking at the changes in enrollment, are we looking at where we were at the same time last year, or are we looking at where we ended up when the kids came to school?
What we've done for the past 4 years is looked at what our actual in-time enrollments are now, because our projections could be inaccurate. So we've put in place a different kindergarten enrollment process this year. In previous years, we had a one-day, full-day kindergarten enrollment. We spread that out over 3 days. Some of the informal feedback from the principals that we've received is that they pretty much have captured a significant number of their families at this point in time. And so we may not see the additional spikes going forward. So example, Lincoln at this time last year probably had 87 to 90 students already identified. And it moved up to 111, 112. They're at 60-something students at this point in time. So the likelihood, according to Mrs. Kalis, of them identifying additional 60-something students, that's not going to happen, because they have a pretty good handle. So we have always worked in actuals in terms of real time, in terms of our enrollment. And when we get close, as we have done in the past, we actually have principals verifying, we actually have principals verifying with our kindergarten families if they still intend to enroll in kindergarten, even though they've gone through the preliminary kindergarten enrollment process. So before we create another section, we've gone through a verification process as well, and that usually takes place sometime in August.
I guess just leveraging off of that, if Lincoln, for the example, went from 80 to 100, would you say that your kindergarten, you know, again, these are projections, we will have to make adjustments based upon where actual enrollments go, but it sounds like kindergarten would be the loosest number, if there was one, the number that might change the most, and perhaps the high school might be the second area, because that would be specific, depends on what courses the students take.
Depends on what courses students might take in summer school. They might drop out of courses that they are tentatively enrolling in for the fall. That's one option. You also have the option where students who intend to take a course in summer school and don't end up taking it, but then want to take that course when the fall semester begins. So there is a little bit of play at the high school, but not as substantive as the number of positions that most likely we'll see at the elementary level. You have your largest number of sections at the elementary level to accommodate. So we'll see some shifts at the high school, but not as dramatically as elementary. Something Ms. Masterton had indicated at a prior meeting is that when she puts a budget together, she generally accounts, I'll say, for 4 to 5 positions. If we go beyond 4 to 5 new positions based on the budget projections, then we are not at where we were in terms of the net reduction we needed to capture. So if an unanticipated number of new special education positions becomes necessary due to new enrollments or shifts in enrollments, that is going to mean we're going to have to be looking for some reductions somewhere else if we're going to try to have the net $3 million reductions going forward to next year. So Ms. Schnorr is in the process of finalizing all of the FTE needed for special education at the high school, and then we'll go through that process at the elementary and middle school. If there are shifts at those levels, then staff will be assigned differently, but we really do need to see what that net increase is, because that will affect Ms. Masterton's tentative budget going forward, and she may be presenting to you later in June the need to try to find potentially another $180,000 to $300,000 in reductions.
Ms. Hirsch?
I realize this has been a very difficult process to go through, but just taking one step back and looking at our enrollment numbers, I have to say, looking at the detail school by school, this fifth grade class is a significant class moving on to middle school, and it's impacted the number of enrollment we have. I think every elementary school, it looks, is going down in enrollment with the exception of Emerson. I'm also amazed, having looked at enrollment numbers at this point in time over years, that our kindergarten numbers are at, with the exception, I think Lincoln is probably the biggest outlier in terms of their enrollment going down. But if I look, our kindergarten enrollment at Edison is 2 more than we had enrolled last year. Emerson's right on. Field is 11 above. Fisher is 4 above. So our kindergarten enrollment process, I think clearly we are getting better information about what our kindergarten enrollment is expected to be in the fall. Now, I'm hoping we don't have a huge surprise that we have a number of families that still have not registered, but we clearly have tightened up our process of getting earlier on a better understanding of what our enrollments are going to be, and I feel much more confident in these numbers moving forward. So I have to say, we've been accustomed to increasing enrollment at our schools for a number of years, and we really are taking a turn. With that, combined with the increase in class size recommendation that the board approved at our March 8th meeting, these are 2 of the core reasons, I think, if that's accurate, as to why we need to have the reduction in staff that we are looking to make at this point.
Would be accurate, Mrs. Hirsch.
Mr. Carlquist?
Dr. Krizik, a few questions, partly to reinforce my understanding, but I think as much as anything, I think to hopefully be able to clarify for those that are trying to understand this. Just first foremost, in terms of, as a comment as a board member, this is, I would say, arguably one of the most unpleasant, difficult responsibilities that the Board of Education administration, any supervisor, manager, has, is in terms of a reduction in force, especially in these kinds of challenging economic times, to have to share with someone the prospect that they may be unemployed is very painful and very difficult. At the same time, the board has been working over a number of months and has had extensive discussion around the challenges that we face financially, enrollment realities, and have landed on the formula, at least in terms of the expected or required number of reductions. So clearly, this is something that's a position we'd prefer not to be in. It very clearly impacts the individual who is given notification. It's impacting students who have, one way or another, been brought into the process, and it impacts an entire building staff, because our buildings, our staffs, are teams. And when someone on the team is impacted, it impacts everyone on the team. Now, with that having been said, one of the things that I think you explained very well was this differential between the notifications, RIF, reduction in force, the notifications that have been given that the board is being asked to take formal action on this evening, and what the expected true number of reductions would be when we're ready to open the doors for the new school year. And so those numbers are roughly 50 notifications, and with somewhere in the range 16 to 21 new or incremental hires, hiring back first out of looking at first at that population. So that, I think, is really important to understand, because at face value, the number of what the reduction and the names on the reduction in force list is alarming. So I think that was first clarification. Second is, could you just confirm that the numbers that you share in the chart that are in fact consistent with the numbers that the board had given in terms of direction and had rolled up out of the EPIRB process? I had heard, for example, in public comment, a concern that said that had questioned the integrity of the EPIRB process and how that translated into RIFs, but in fact, what I understand you to be reporting is that the numbers that are, that were designed or prescribed or directed to the administration through EPERT are in fact the RIF reductions that ultimately are expected to be realized, correct?
Yes and no. In the EPERT process, when we did the analysis, let's say on class size, it was based on district-wide averages. And then when you ultimately do that analysis on a school-by-school basis, it changes it. So for example, we had projected that there would be 8 sections less in K-5 for FY12. In reality, there was 15.5. We had projected there would be 2.2 reductions in 2.2 FTE reductions of core teaching positions at the middle school, but the distribution of the enrollment, even though Sandburg dropped slightly, but there was an increase in 6th grade at other schools, and it ended up with a net 0 of reductions at the middle school. And we applied then the same process at the high school, and there was a projected net FTE in core areas of 4.6, but then there were other areas where reductions were to be seen. For example, 0.6 in the cohort. There was an art reduction to be taken. There was counseling to be taken, but that really affected the middle school. There was were language reductions to be taken. So in reality, the answer is yes, we stayed true to the process. The application of the process increased the number of FTE reductions, but the process was applied as we had discussed it over the past several meetings. It is the implementation of the process that has been so disconcerting to so many, including a reflection of the public comment we've heard this evening, where there is a perception that we're not being, we're not being, our integrity with the implementation of the process is subject to some scrutiny, whereby there are more FTE reductions in the English department than were recommended in the overall staffing reduction in the English department. But that, again, is to be explained by that whole, there is no seniority within a non-tenured group of individuals. And because we didn't have enough first-year teachers to reduce, to cover the 2.2, we needed to go into the 3rd year. So that's where that discrepancy is. But what that means is that if we are reducing 6.0 FTE in English, in reality, there are 3.8 positions to be recalled or to be reopened at some point in time.
So then just going on a little bit further with clarification, these numbers that you're describing and the reductions for us also take into consideration retirements. So where there are employees who have already announced their intention to retire, that is able to be addressed through this, as well as what's referred to as non-renewals, which are decisions to not renew a teacher's contract based on performance reasons, correct?
We took into account retirements and non-renewals where we could. The issue is in the implementation of the vacancies has to do with certifications. So we needed to make sure that the staff that we will have in place for next year have the certifications necessary for the positions. So we did take those into account where we could, but there will be, as we've pointed out, there's 10.5 vacancies at the elementary level. And some of that is due to vacancies due to retirements at the elementary. So it's all interplays with each other.
And then while there are districts that will approach a riffing process by simply across the board, including on the list, all part-time or all first year or all second year, and then work back off of that, this district, chose an approach deliberately to minimize the number of notifications that had to be given, but in order to be able to achieve the total reductions that are expected, and again, the reason for the discrepancy you've described multiple times in multiple different ways are a result of, as Mrs. Ostojek mentioned at the very beginning, Illinois school code, agreements with, as a part of collective bargaining for things like tenure, things like, again, collective bargaining agreements, priority, bumping, and so forth, correct?
That is correct.
I guess my last comment is, in part, given that we had such, a substantial number of, relative to what we would normally see in a board meeting, number of students who spoke this evening. First of all, I'd like to, applaud them for engaging in the process, caring enough to be here, to invest the time, to be in tune with this process, for expressing their opinion. And frankly, I think they're doing it largely as a reflection of the admiration and respect and support that they have for their teachers, which has, in just yet another way, we have an outstanding group of teachers in the district. So I understand why it's very, painful process. It's also, though, I think important that those students have a good understanding of the complexity and the nuances that you went through, at least those students who have an interest in it, because clearly this has become an aspect of the instructional day today and yesterday, rightly or wrongly. And so I'm hopeful that our teachers, those that are here, can find positive ways to engage their students who have an interest in that kind of a discussion, and not have it be a distraction to the instructional process going forward. Thank you for the answers.
Any other board discussion on this? Okay, seeing none, we will move forward on our agenda. Our next item is approval of board meeting minutes. We have meeting minutes from February 8th, 13th, 22nd, 28th, March 6th, and March 8th meeting minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes as presented? Nope, seeing none, they will be approved as presented. Our next item on our agenda is the superintendent's consent agenda. Are there any items any board members would like removed from the agenda? Mr. Carlquist?
I'd like to remove for action and discussion individually item N, the approval of the York Stadium lighting upgrade.
Thank you. Any other items to be removed? Mrs. Deroney?
The themes grants, please, item F.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda absent items F and items N? Mr.
I
Carlquist?
move the approval of the consent agenda, which has items that are considered, either have been previously reviewed by the board or considered perfunctory in their approval, with the exceptions of items, the two items that have been referenced, F and N.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Conroy. We have financial reports on here, so we need to have a roll call. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Carlquist?
Yes.
Ms. Conroy? Mrs. Davy is absent. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Ostojic?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Thank you. 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. May I have a motion for item F? Mr. Carlquist?
I move that the Board of Education approve the themes instructional grants.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Mrs. Deroney. Any board discussion? Mrs. Deroney?
Just wanted to briefly take a moment to thank the foundation for, once again, granting all of these fine opportunities to our students. They're particularly important now when we're in the throes of cuts. They continue to bring wonderful opportunities of enrichment to our classrooms, and they work hard to get these grants. I want to thank the people who applied for them, as well as the foundation for raising the money to fund them. I just couldn't let it go in the consent agenda without that little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. We just need a voice vote for this item. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries. And our last consent agenda item that was removed for separate discussion is item N. Can I have a motion, please? Mr. Carlquist.
Madam Chair, may I engage in some discussion prior to a motion, unless there's a board member who's ready for a motion? My question on this item is, first, clearly we've had extensive discussion this evening for months about expense reduction, so clearly that is foremost in my mind a great concern. Counterbalancing that is a strong feeling that we have a responsibility to our community, to the neighbors, both the users of that facility as well as those that are neighbors of the facility, to take corrective action. My bigger concern is there's been much effort, energy expended, and much reported by activities in front of the Zoning Planning Commission, whatever recommendations, requests, proposals from the school district for alterations to the existing ordinance that has some significant constraints on the school district, on the high school for utilization of that facility. My question is whether or not this action is out of sequence with having some resolution with the city on and the zoning planning commission in terms of what kinds of constraints, restrictions may remain, may be added, or may be lifted for that facility. Because it would concern me that even if the district got to a point where it was prepared to support either in total or some kind of matching funds with private contributions, that I think would be a strategy as a way of deferring these costs, that it would be inappropriate to do that without some understanding of what's going to happen with the dialogue that's going on right now intergovernmentally.
Let me just take a step back to say the only reason that this recommendation is on the agenda for this evening, and whether it is approved or not approved, it is closing out the bid process. We ask for your permission to go out for bid, to actually see what the fiscal obligation would be to do a light retrofit to reduce the spill and to make some changes. And so we did that. Mr. Shu had the foresight to write in his RFP that the proposal's price, the lowest bidder's price, would be good for 120 days. So should this motion fail this evening and come back at a later time, it could, the bid is still good for 120 days. It gives us the opportunity also, Mr. Carlquist, to also potentially work with some of our support organizations to see if they, in fact, can make a contribution towards the cost of these lights, should we want to go forward with that. I think the Zoning and Planning Commission, as well as the York Advisory Committee, has been incredibly sensitive to the fiscal needs of the district, as well as what our capital needs are, and not necessarily having this as a priority expenditure. But we have made that clear with the Zoning and Planning Commission, that there is no guarantee that we have the fiscal resources to make any changes to the lights going forward. And I don't believe that that is their intent, to make a change to the lights conditional in the ordinance process. It is more about use, not necessarily about the spillage piece. We heard testimony from actually an Elmhurst resident who is a coach at Oak Park River Forest, who Oak Park River Forest underwent, they had lights put in this year, and they actually believe York's lights, as they are, provide better field lighting for the players, which is really, at the end of the day, you need to ensure the safety of the players, because that's what our primary responsibility is. So I am not anticipating that this will be a motion that will pass this evening, but it gives us two things. It gives us information to work with any boosters or any donors that would like to make a donation to this. It helps us communicate to the city of Elmhurst what that fiscal exposure is to us. And it is a quote that lasts for 120 days, should we have the opportunity to revisit this at some point in the future. So in the sequence of things, I think this is the right time to have this sequence.
So, Madam President, with that in mind, I would move that the Board of Education direct the administration to bring this item back on a board agenda inside of that 120-day window, with sufficient time to take action if it's the board's pleasure at that point in time. And in that period of time, by putting that period, that's the motion, let me stop there and then we'll go to discussion. So in terms of discussion then, it would be, I think by having that motion, it first of all puts this motion on the table so the board can react and comment on what it would like to see, if anything, related to this. And secondly, I would like this to be the first step, and that we use that period of time first and foremost, to try, and I appreciate your comment of saying that it's utilization, not the intensity and the range, and as Mr. Shu would say, the number of candle power showing up, however many, in the radius of the stadium and the like. But nonetheless, we use this as an impetus to try to drive to some closure on this need for clarification or modification of the ordinance. That's point one. And point two, that we work with the right departments in the district, the high school, which is where I think this really belongs in terms of managing this situation to a resolution, to see if there is some interest, much like the district was able to very successfully fund that stadium project with significant private contributions, to see if there is a way through some kind of, call it public-private partnership, to be able to solution the needs with ideally no or maybe nominal commitment of tax dollars, but nonetheless at a bid response rate that is significantly lower than what was at least originally estimated, and do the right thing as a good neighbor and the right thing for students.
Mr. Collins.
I'd like to add to what Mr. Carlquist is saying, that there's one thing in here that I had asked for as part of this proposal, a remote on-off capability for those lights and a timer for those lights, and I didn't see it in this RFP. I wonder, Ms. Mester, are you saying it's in there and I missed it? Can you tell me the amount of money?
The solution that was proposed by the 4 vendors responding to the RFP includes off-site light management, scheduling, timing, and feedback. It wasn't line itemed out because it's integral to that actual solution. One of the things that we could bring back at a later time would be a completely separate solution for just redoing the circuitry, power, and controls at the existing lighting to make those more schedulable from off-site and more controllable than they currently are. I mean, right now, the high-tech on-off system for those lights is the 4 breakers, and whatever person happens to be there to turn them on and off. So obviously, any even $10,000 or $15,000 reworking of the circuitry to something that resembles at least 1985, if not more recently, could help alleviate some of our scheduling difficulties and some of the likelihood for human error. But the solution that's actually proposed by these 4 companies is integral to the actual lighting system that's going in place, so it's not line itemed.
Yeah, as I listened to the community, a piece of it was certainly the human error that you referred to, leaving those lights on until 2:30 in the morning. So when we bring this back, if we do, I'd like to see what the price is to rework what we have with that remote on-off and timer capability, so that when we tell the neighbors those lights are going off at 11 o'clock, someone can actually be held responsible to program that thing to turn them off at 11 o'clock automatically. So if I can suggest that when we bring this back, if that's included. Plus, the other point I'd like to make is we're talking about spending roughly $120,000 out of a capital improvements budget that is now down to $3 million. And Mr. Shu, you, through your diligent work, have projected that over the next 10 years, we're going to need $10 million in that budget just to do the maintenance work on our buildings, with $4 million out of that $10 million going to Lincoln School. So I also ask that at some point in the near future, we have a discussion about what our long-range plan is for Lincoln School, and then the next logical school is Field. That we should know over the next 10 or 15 years what our plans are for those buildings before we spend $4 million in patching a 95-year-old building together and then decide we're going to tear it down. I just want to make sure that we are using the taxpayers' dollars in the most responsible and efficient way we possibly can, and that's through some planning here.
Ms. Hirsch?
When the board, when this RFP was brought to the board, I, at the time, had indicated that I was not comfortable and I had voted no. I didn't think it was appropriate for us to go out and talk to vendors about spending, first of all, using up their time, asking their resources for something that I don't know that the board has the will to move forward to. I concur with Mr. Collins in that we have $3 million in our capital funds right now. We have over $10 million identified of capital requirements, which does not include the large-scale concerns that we have with some of our facilities. I believe there are also some roofs that were indicated were less than a 5-year lifespan that were significant dollars of that budget. And so while I appreciate that being able to upgrade the technology and the lights in the field is something that would be a favorable thing to do, I don't think that it is within the realm of our capital projects. And for me personally, it doesn't fit high enough on the list in terms of what our priorities are and should be moving forward long-term as a board. So although, again, I appreciate that closing out the bid process, Mr. Carquist, I apologize. I think we need to be clear that, you know, if it's the will of the board to consider spending the dollars in the near future, then it's the will of the board to consider spending the dollars. I right now am not in any position, even within 120 days, to consider spending over $100,000 on something that is non-critical. It's important. We want to be great neighbors. I do like some of the things, some of the discussions that we're having. I would really like to work with the city collaboratively to try to come up with something that is going to take into consideration the neighbors' concerns. I would like to try to come up with some processes, and again, if that belongs at the high school, those discussions, that's fine. But I'm not comfortable spending the money at this point.
Mrs. Conroy?
I also didn't support going to RFP on this, and to a point that Mr. Carlquist made, you know, we've gotten to a point with the economy and with the budget where we've had to really prioritize, you know, where we're spending our money, and it's been extremely difficult. And while we have different budgets, and I certainly wish in a perfect world we could take this money and pay for another teacher, I understand that we can't. But I would like to make a point that it was wonderful when we had community members and others come forward and help us with the field. That was a wonderful thing to see happen, and many people are very proud of that. But when we talk about these types of things, again, I don't think, I'd like to see people, if they're going to come forward, there's a lot better use of $100,000 than fixing the lights for our students. And in the best interest of our students, I think if we would ever consider looking for that, again, I don't think lights is in the best interest of our students.
I'm going to support Mr. Carlquist's motion. I would not have supported the original motion on here, and I struggle with that a little bit because we are only to the degree that, you know, we have individuals out there trying to figure out how to negotiate through this. I don't believe that, you know, we have $117,000 to spend on a lighting upgrade, and for that reason, I wouldn't have supported the motion. However, I do think, you know, Mr. Collins, you threw out an interesting suggestion. What can we work with our existing one? So I think asking, first of all, we would have to make sure that the dollars we're spending are going to resolve the issue for the ordinance, and we don't know that, in fact. So, I mean, I think to Mr. Carlquist's original point, I don't know that all the pieces are in the right order here, that we're in a position to come up with a resolution on the lighting, and by deferring this to a point when we have a better idea on that, you can vote on what the right solution is for the lights. So I'm glad that we don't have to say no to this, because I think that makes a very negative statement that we don't care and we're not trying to solve this problem. So for that reason, I appreciate your revised motion, Mr. Carlquist, and I will support that. With that, I will ask Mrs. Walsh to please call the roll.
Mr. Carlquist?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
No.
Mrs. Davy is absent. Mrs. Ostochek?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Conroy?
Thank you. We have 4 ayes, 2 nays, 1 absent. That motion carries. Our next item on our agenda is notification of upcoming meetings. We have a meeting scheduled on Tuesday, April 12th, our Board of Education workshop meeting, regular time here at 7:30 at the District 205 Center. Following that, April 26th, Board of Education Organization and Business, Reorganization and Business meeting. So we have elections coming up on April 5th. Just want to remind everybody to please exercise your right to vote and go and vote for the candidates you feel most appropriate. And on Tuesday, April 26th, those new board members will be seated. We have several actions coming out of closed session. Our first action is related to employment of employee, and it is a termination of employee. May I have a motion, please? Ms. Hirsch?
That the Board of Education adopt the resolution entitled Resolution Authorizing Notice of Dismissal to Fourth-Year Teacher.
Okay, we're going a little bit out of order to the reductions in force. So we have a motion by Ms. Hirsch, seconded by Mr. Carlquist. So this is the notice authorizing dismissal to a fourth-year teacher, correct? Okay, thank you. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mr. Carlquist? Mrs. Davy is absent. Ms. Conroy? Mr. Collins? Mrs. Ostojic?
Yes.
Mrs. Droney?
Yes. Thank you. We have 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion carries. May I have a motion for the item for the dismissal of a maintenance employee? Mrs. Deroni.
I move that the Board of Education approve the dismissal of a maintenance employee as discussed in closed session.
Moved by Mrs. Deroni, seconded by Mr. Kralquist. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mr. Carlquist?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Davy is absent. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mrs. Ostojic?
Yes.
Ms. Conroy?
Thank you. That's 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion carries. May I have a motion for the resolution for dismissal of non-renewal of part-time and full-time employee? Ms. Hirsch?
That the Board of Education adopt the resolution entitled Resolution Authorizing Dismissal and Non-Renewal of Part-Time and Certain Full-Time Probationary Teachers.
Moved by Ms. Hirsch, seconded by Mr. Kralquist. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call? Sorry, moved by Ms. Hirsch, seconded by Mr. Kralquist. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Mr. Carlquist?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Ms. Conroy? Mrs. Davy is absent. Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mrs. Ostojic?
Yes, that is 6 ayes, no nays. That motion carries. We have 1 additional closed session item, and I'm going to break protocol a little bit and start with the motion myself. I am going to move that the Board of Education appoint David L. Purnell as the school district's new superintendent and approve the July 1st, 2011 through June 30th, 2014 performance-based superintendent contract with Mr. Purnell as presented by the board president, and to authorize the president and secretary to sign the contract on behalf of the board. Seconded by Mrs. Conroy. And as motion maker, I'm going to read just some introductory comments. The selection of a superintendent is one of the most important decisions that a Board of Education makes, and this board has taken that responsibility very seriously. On a combined basis, we represent over 60 years of experience serving as board members, and we were able to use that valuable experience in making our decision. We engaged a professional search firm, School Exec Connect, which allowed us to recruit the strongest pool of candidates possible. And our process allowed for all stakeholders to provide input into the superintendent's profile through an online survey tool, through multiple focus groups that were held over 4 different dates to allow the most flexible options for individuals to participate. Many individuals also provided input through emails to the board and conversations with board members throughout our town. From the input we received through the various sources, as well as the board's discussion, a profile was created defining the key attributes of a successful leader for our district. We conducted a national search, and all candidates were first thoroughly vetted by a search firm. The candidates were then narrowed down through phone and in-person interviews to a group of 3 finalists who were brought in for intensive interviews with 2 different stakeholder groups, one including district administrators and a second including teachers, staff, parents, and other community members. Finally, the 3 candidates met with the Board of Education in both formal and informal settings to arrive at our final choice. This evening, the Board of Education will vote on a contract to David L. Pernot as the next instructional leader for our district beginning on July 1st. Mr. Pernot is currently superintendent of the Rochester Community Schools, which ranks in the top 2% of the state of Michigan academically. He will be joining our district after 6 years as a superintendent in Rochester, a district that serves 15,000 K-12 students with approximately 1,900 employees and an annual budget of $155 million. While at Rochester, Mr. Pernot established a district-wide professional learning community that has resulted in improved academic performance for all students, as well as individual student planning that assess success on a base of college readiness. Through strategic planning, he led the creation of a number of student intervention models that successfully improved academic and behavioral performance for at-risk students and reduced the achievement gap in subgroup populations. Dave started his career in education as a second-grade teacher in DeWitt, Michigan, and after 5 years of classroom experience, he moved into instructional leadership roles, including serving as an elementary principal, director of curriculum instruction before taking on the role of superintendent. He has served the majority of his career in 2 Michigan school districts. He's the recipient of a Michigan State School and Business Partnerships Award, National Exemplary Principal Award, and was nominated for Michigan Superintendent of the Year, and was recently named the 2010 Michigan Parent-Teacher Association Educator of the Year, among other award recognitions. I am going to be supporting this motion because I believe that Dave Pernot is an excellent match for our district leadership profile. He's got proven leadership skills to move the district forward. He has a child-centered approach, and he brings a successful track record in improving outcome for all students. He is known for his focus on communication, and he has a demonstrated ability to connect well with various constituencies. The attributes that were used to describe him in the interview included a visionary, a team builder, collaborator, and student-centered amongst many other strengths. So for that, that's my motion, and the latter part is my support for the motion I made. Any board discussion? Nope. Ms.
I'm very excited about moving forward and supporting the motion on the table. I have to say that this board engaged in a rigorous and thoughtful process, had excellent candidates to review. We benefited greatly as a board in our process of collecting feedback from teachers, from staff, from the administrative team, and as well having discussions with very high-quality superintendent candidates. I think this board had great conversations about what we believe is the right thing for our students moving forward. And I believe that we have an excellent selection for our new instructional leader moving forward. I look forward to welcoming Mr. Pernot into our community and into our schools. And I feel comfortable saying that I think that he's very excited as well to come in and to meet our teams who are providing instruction and working with our students on a daily basis. So I'm very, very happy to support this motion.
Thank you. Mr. Colquitt.
Just a few comments. First of all, as Mrs. Ostrich said, April 15th will be an opportunity to, for the public, for staff, for others to meet Mr. Pernot for the first time in many cases, and so we really urge and encourage folks to take advantage of that opportunity to get to know him. The contract doesn't go into effect until July 1st. But there's a significant amount of activity in the district, particularly as central office, a leadership team begins to shift its attention and its focus substantially to preparing for the new school year. It's only appropriate that this district have in place the next superintendent so that he can begin to work with that team, shape that team, and have his imprint on those plans going forward. I also think it's appropriate, and there will be time between now and the end of the year, Dr. Krizik, when your contract concludes, to express our appreciation not only for your service to this district, but really for the way that you have continued to persevere throughout this year under challenging circumstances in a lot of respects, reduction in force and budget, and knowing that your time in the district was coming to a close. A superintendent is arguably is a critical position in a district, but it's only one leadership position. I too am very pleased with the attributes and the characteristics and the experience that Mr. Pernod will be able to bring to this district. I think it shows through in his extensive CV that Mrs. Ostichik went through, the recognition, the adulation that he's received, and his track record as an educator, as a leader, and fitting the profile that has been outlined by the board, by our focus groups, by our teachers council, and more. But as I say, it's just one individual, and this is an individual in a role that will really require the full support of the board, the full support of the leadership, the administrators across our district, and the whole community, so that we can work together to keep this district moving forward on the strong, positive trajectory that I believe it is on. One other comment. I have expressed to my colleagues reservations, or I should say some preference that I had for taking action after the elections. As people may or may not be aware, it was referenced a little bit earlier that there will be a new board organizational meeting on April 26th. So while we have Election Day coming up the first week of April, this board continues in its leadership responsibilities until the end of April, because there's this period of time where we have board members elect while the votes are canvassed and before the new board is seated. I would have preferred, given that we're less than 2 weeks away from having 3, maybe 4 brand new faces sitting here at the table, to have involved those people in a more extensive way. However, with that having been said, as a board, it's our interest and our intention to take whomever those board members elect are and bring them up to speed just as quickly and swiftly as we can in terms of the process, the insights that we had in this candidate, and why this selection was made. And so again, while my preference would have been to have involved those who are going to be working with this new superintendent over the course of the next 4 years, I also feel that it is appropriate that we move forward, given the exposure that this district has, I think potentially given the amount of change at the board table, the administrative positions with multiple significant cabinet positions, which will not, individuals who will not be here next year, building administrative positions that are open, and so forth. So for that reason, I'm still going to support the motion this evening.
Mrs. Davy is not here to vote this evening. She did ask if I could read a statement. She is in support of the motion, and I'm not going to paraphrase. I'll read her comment. To my fellow board members, I would like to speak in support of the motion to extend a 3-year contract to David Pernod. Throughout the interview process, I have been extremely impressed by his knowledge in all areas of school operations, his grasp of complex educational issues, his expertise in curriculum, and his overall enthusiasm for the opportunity to work with our board, staff, and administration as we continue our path of continued academic improvement. I'm sorry that I cannot be in attendance at tonight's meeting to cast my yes vote for Mr. Pernod. I am in full support of him as our next superintendent. Mrs. Deroni.
I just want to add, I absolutely agree with the comments that have been made eloquently. I just do want to say that of all the people that we talked to and interviewed for this position, Mr. Pernod is the one I feel has the skills, the experience, and the background to continue the work that this administration has started, which has been demonstrated improvement in student achievement. And I believe he'll be able to do that, and I am going to support this.
Mrs. Conroy?
I also agree with everything that's been said and would just like to add 2 small points that sum up a little bit of who I felt this particular person is. And it really stood out to me when we interviewed him. One of the comments he said was he likes to get into the hearts and minds of teachers. And he also described himself as a servant leader. And I think going forwards that he's the right fit for our district. So I'll be supporting this tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Ostojic,
Yes.
Ms. Conroy,
Yes.
Mrs. Droney,
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch.
Yes.
Mrs. Davy is absent. Mr. Cronquist,
Yes.
Mr. Collins.
Yes.
Thank you. 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. That motion carries. That's our last item coming out of closed session. We have board communications, and I know, Dr. Krizik, you have something to share. If you don't mind, I'm just gonna jump in. I do want to make one additional statement, and I think Mrs. Duroni spoke to it, and Mr. Carlquist a little bit. But we're transitioning into new leadership for our district, and I think it's important to recognize the work done by our current superintendent during her 5 years in service to our district. Dr. Krizik was hired in 2006 with the expectation that she would look critically at every aspect of the educational and operational programs of the district. She would initiate necessary changes and assist the board in developing new goals for the district, as well as pathways to achieve these goals. Through extraordinary hard work and intelligent leadership, Dr. Krizik has been able to achieve the following accomplishments during her tenure. She has shown strong, proactive fiscal management, leading to financial recognition and fiscal stability, including the introduction and excuse me, I need to, too much talking here tonight, including the introduction and implementation of an educational program review tool, the EPIRT process, which aided the district in making $3 million of budget cuts this past year. She led the development of a strategic plan, continued increase in student achievement in reading, math, and science over the last 4 years, creation of an in-house technology department, enabling a more focused technology infrastructure plan and hardware acquisition, increased focus on curriculum, which has resulted in the alignment of reading curriculum grades K through 8, math grades 6 to 8, and science 6 through 12, the alignment of professional development to strategic initiatives, our professional learning community progress, development of power standards to align with Common Core standards in literacy and math to further strengthen curriculum, work on implementation of a comprehensive assessment system to inform curriculum and improve student outcome, and oversight of $42 million of construction projects that were completed on time and within budget. As we look to our transition to our new leadership in 2011-2012, we'd like to take a moment to thank Dr. Krizik for the contributions she has made to our district and to advancing the outcome of students. So thank you. And I know you have some additional announcements you'd like to make.
This kind of segues into the strategic plan. One of the initiatives that we had in our strategic plan was to increase the number of AP courses as well as student participation in AP. That strategic plan was introduced several years ago, and we learned last week that District 205 is one of 388 school districts across the nation being honored by the College Board for not only increasing the student participation rate in AP exams, but also improving the percentage of students earning scores of 3 or higher over that same three-year period. This accomplishment is attributed to both our students for helping us achieve this national recognition, as well as for the staff in their critical role of helping us achieve the vision in this strategic plan. So we'll have more information coming out, but what we saw in 2008, we had 612 exams taken by 288 students in 2008, compared to 888 886 tests taken by 424 students in 2010. So it isn't, this recognition is not just for increase the number of exams taken, but in the performance of our students on those exams. So much congratulations should be extended to all of the staff that have worked to help attain this vision. So much to be proud of this evening.
That is terrific news. Thank you for sharing that. Are there any other board communications? Okay, seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Kralquist, seconded by Ms. Hirsch. All in favor? Those opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you again to all those who have joined us this evening.